There's a cat over here. There's a cat over there. And the wrong one died. And the wrong one died. Welcome to The Wrong Cat Died, the podcast breakdown of the catastrophe. I'm your host, Mike Abrams, and today we have another amazing guest. He was on the infamous U.S. National Tour 5 as Tumblebrutus, but he's also performed in, I believe, over 9 productions and has casted it before and has done a ton of work on cats, and is currently a casting director at the Fulton Theater in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So welcome, Joey Abramowicz, and thank you for joining me.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm excited to dig into the casting piece because that's something I just haven't talked as much about. And I mean, you've done this so many times and so many different versions and productions and played characters. So I'm excited to hear all your different takes. But I always want to start at the beginning because you are in the era that was like right around the 1998 movie of being probably like, it's not like you grew up with it as a child and you watched it as a little kid, but what was your first introduction to the show? Was it that movie or was it some version that traveled around the country?
I was a theater kid, grew up in New Orleans, and my parents, they fostered my interest in it. So instead of celebrating Mardi Gras when I was in 4th grade, we took a trip to New York City, and I saw Cats on Broadway in 1989, I think it was. So that was my first introduction to it. I'll never forget Green Eyes, during the prologue. It's just crazy. And then going up and, meeting old dude on the tire.
So you got to go up at intermission?
Oh, they still did that back then, yeah. So that was my first time with the show. And then obviously, yes, I was graduating high school in 97. So that video came out. I was going to college as a theater major. And, I excelled at dance. So I, of course, gravitated towards that show. And I was a gymnast. So that was like the perfect show for me to be in.
Yeah.
And I lucked out. I lucked out and got to be a part of it early on.
So did you, like, when you saw that show and you saw it the first time and being a gymnast and being a dancer, did you gravitate towards a Tumblebrutus or somebody who did some of the tumbling passes?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think I really remembered character names when I was younger. And even when seeing the DVD, I just was like, oh, well, this is a perfect show for me. Like I just, I was a strong tumbler, a trained tumbler. I knew I could tumble 8 times a week and be healthy. So yeah, and then when I got the show, it was kind of like one of those dream things where I picked up the phone, called my parents, and was like, "Oh my gosh, you guys aren't going to believe this,"
That's amazing.
So yeah.
Was it the first one? If you were a theater kid growing up and you did New York trips, like where was Cats in that? Like, was it the first thing you went and saw, or was it a couple trips in?
No, that was the first trip to New York. We saw Cats, we saw Les Mis, we saw A Chorus Line, and Nonsense. The 4 shows that my parents,
3 classics,
and then
Nonsense.
A Catholic boy, they were like, yeah, let's throw some nuns in there as well.
Wow. Okay, so this is first trip. How old were you at that first trip?
I was
89.
I was 11 years old. Yeah.
Okay, so you were an age where probably all the sexual stuff went over your head.
Oh, completely.
And it's just a dance numbers.
It was just a big dance show for me. Mm-hmm.
And then you get it, but walk me through your Cats resume, because you emailed it to me, and it's extensive. So just as a performer, not as on the other side of the house, but as a performer, you've done it 9 times?
9 times total, yes. I've done, So the first time I did the show, I had been in New York for about a year. I went on a small national tour prior to Cats, and when I went to the audition, and it was for the Equity Tour had closed when Broadway closed. So when Broadway was closing, they closed the Equity Tour. And then I went out, I was auditioning for replacements for the second year of the non-Ec Tour 5.
Yep.
And I was in the audition. It was one of those classic auditions where there were like 60 guys there, and then it turned into 10 guys. Then we had a call back the next day, and I was like, I'm getting this. I'm so getting this show, And we all exchanged numbers, and we all said, hey, be in touch if you hear anything. And they all started getting offers, and I didn't get it. And I just was like, I don't understand. How did I not get the show? Fast forward about 4 weeks later, my house phone in my apartment rang, and it was director choreographer Richard Stafford, who was kind of like, we called him, he just took care of the show for years on Broadway, and he was who I had auditioned for the tour. They needed an immediate replacement for Tumblebrutus at Westchester Broadway Theater, which was the first theater that was doing the show regionally after it had closed on Broadway. I literally met him on 10th and 49th in a car and drove up to Westchester that night and started learning the show in a conference room and went on 6 days later. So
6 days. Wow.
I learned the show in 6 days. Yeah. I was 23. So it was like, I was a sponge. I absorbed it. And I remember telling the sound guy at Westchester the day that I went on, I said, don't turn my microphone on because I don't know all the words yet. I know the dances, but I don't know the words. So that was my first time with the show. And then I ended up going out on that tour, tour 5, as kind of a replacement for the first few months. When the Tumblebrutus would get injured and have to be out of the show, they brought me in. And then he ended up leaving the tour, and I finished out tour 5 that year of the tour.
So that is crazy. So you basically were like, they were trying to fill in the tour in year 2, like they were start.
Yeah, I think your former guest, Jean-Michel, Tucker and I, we were, not Tucker, but Jean-Michel definitely, we joined that tour as newbies.
Yeah, and because I've talked to a couple of people on year 1, I've talked to a lot of people on the later half of the 10 years I think the tour went on.
Yeah.
And I didn't even place how long it went for a long time. But yeah, okay. So you go in 6 days, learn the show. In 6 days, you're not learning anything about Tumblebrutus' story. You're just like trying to not get, be in the right place at the right time.
Exactly. And then on top of it, learning the salinity, not just dancing, but learning how to be a cat, which, develops over time. For me, I ended up, I think I ended up being a pretty good cat. And then on tour, I would end up, when any new swings would join us, I would go help them. We'd play in a room and like do things about salinity, because that's a huge part of it as well. It's not just the dance.
Yeah, so it's the salinity, it's the dance, it's the singing, which you just said for first night, forget that, don't worry about it. Oh gosh,
yeah.
And then then you go on tour, and you start as injury replacement, and then you go on tour for a year, right? You do the full year?
For a year. Mm-hmm.
And then, so that tour, we can come back to that tour because there's a lot, but I think we've heard a lot about that tour. But then what's the rest look like? Because you did it at Beef and Boards, was just down the street from where I grew up. You did it in, where else? I think in Texas, maybe in Maine.
I did it in Houston, Maine, Ohio, everywhere. Yeah. So what happened was I got off of that tour, and the last thing I wanted to do was continue to audition for cats, because I had just done it for a year. But at the time, that was just this wave of regional theaters doing the show, because it had closed on Broadway, and people were just getting the show, and I knew it. So it's one of those things where if the director has a group of people who already kind of knows the show, you just get a phone call that says, "Hey, I'm doing it at Walnut Street Theater. Come do the show with me." So I lucked out and rode that wave of cats, and was lucky to meet Marc Robin, who I now currently work for. He was the first director to kind of get the rights to do the show differently than Gillian Lynn, Trevor Nunn. He took a story and kind of recreated it. So there's his version of the show that I do, and then there's the original version. So I've done 4 of the original choreography show, and I've done 5 versions of Marc Robin's.
So walk me through what the differences are, what you can kind of speak to on the difference between Marc's and Gillian's. Like, is it purely choreography? Is it story? Is it, like, how much differs?
I would say the biggest difference is his approach to the story. The choreographies, you can't really stray too far from the style, because at the same time, you're still choreographing for people who are acting like cats. So there's the salinity aspect is still there, but I would say his approach to the story, I think he looked at it as a whole and took a little bit more of a human approach to telling the story about character. He kind of set the show up so that Grizabella was really good friends with Bomb Ballerina, Jenny Annie Dots, Jelly Lorum, and Demeter. And his whole idea is that Syllabub is Grizabella's daughter, but we don't know who Syllabub's father is. It could be Tugger, it could be Munkustrap, it could be Alonzo, it could be McCavity. But his story is that Grizabella left her baby with those girls, her friends. And so the reason why she's rejected when she's coming back at the top of the show is because these girls were like, we can't be friends with you anymore. You've left us, and we took care of her, and we haven't told her who you are. So that's the attraction of Syllabub to Grizabella in Marc's story. And I think it's just the way with the staging, it just kind of comes across as a more human story that I think an audience can follow.
Yeah, well, so that's always been, and why this podcast exists, is my gripe is when I saw, and granted, I saw Andy Blankenbuehler's choreography. So I saw like a not totally different show, but I now have learned from the super fans, like there's a pretty wide split between people who don't like that there was a redone, but that's all I knew. I know the 98 movie because that's all I have access to. And the show I've seen, which is Andy's.
Which is a version of the original, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Marc's version is more storytelling, which is what my gripe was with what I saw in Andy's, is that there is no storytelling. So I kind of always thought maybe it was Victoria was Grizabella's daughter, and the same kind of thing you're saying, but the storyline is coming back for her.
Yeah, that's more the original kind of story and concept, I think. Victoria's definitely featured in special in Marc Robin's version of the show, but the story about a possible child is more syllabub in his version.
What other backstories does he add? Because like I love the character development part of this that seemed loose, and I understand that from like the original where they're just like the joke is like it's just cats, it's like it's just cats. Like that's not really that story development as much as I think the fans have added to it. But it seems like Marc has added some because to tell it more of a human element. Yeah,
I think the other big point in his production is that they're all they're coming to present themselves to Doot to be chosen that night.
Yeah.
They're all coming to get his votes to go. And then, he uses, I think it's Gus and it's Jenny are his two other contestants that are, kind of get they're in the final three with Grizz. And the cats as a whole are kind of the jury. They even kind of, during that portion of the show, they were all kind of lined up almost like a jury, and they nod and they say, no, not Gus, not Jenny. We want her. She's the one that should go.
Okay, so it is it's crowd vote, and it's between the final three, and they pick Grizz. Okay, we'll get into that at the end because I have gripes with that.
And one other thing, he sets the show in different places. So it's been done in an abandoned amusement park. We did it in an abandoned theater. We set it in in Ohio. We did it in an abandoned tire factory. So we were all on all these tires everywhere. It's a cool concept. God. Yeah. One version, Grizabella was on, she was on the tassel of the curtain and ascended over the audience to the back of the theater. That was her exit to the Heaviside Layer.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's cool. That's what we go to theater for, is to, why would you want to go see something that you've seen before? Take a different approach to it, and show an audience a different version that they may not even think they need to see, All
right. Well, we're going to spend the end of this, me trying to convince you and Marc to let me do my version that I want to do.
Let's hear it.
Let's get into it now. I want to do a version where the audience votes on the Jellicle choice. And since if you stage it regionally for 3 weeks, or even on a tour, you could do this where the cast, let the cast go belt their numbers and then let the audience vote on who do they think was the most fun that night. And I love the idea of it because it brings in this element of it makes the cast a little competitive to have fun of who really sold their performance.
Oh,
but also whose friends and family are in the audience tonight? Can they stack the vote one day? And then just let that person go. I don't think it dramatically changes the story that much because you still have Grizabella singing memory. She still comes back. She either rejoins the tribe. She can go hang with Syllabub for the rest of the year. And whoever goes just goes up on the tire, and then you still do your dressing the cats and you end. I think that'd be so fun to have an Edwin Drew style every night. Who knows? Who went out there and delivered?
We actually did that on his approach to Chorus Line. We actually did that where the Zach chose a different different people to get the show each night. So you didn't know if you were going to get cast in the show that night. You worked your butt off to say, hey, pick me tonight.
See?
I want to be in the final line.
I think there's something to it. It doesn't even have to be audience. It could be old Deuteronomy, just making the pick every night.
Right?
It could be, but I think that there's some like you said, you go to theater to see a different experience. Imagine if all of a sudden Cork Pat got picked because their whole family and dance studio came that night.
Can you imagine? Tonight it's the twins. The twins are going.
Yeah, but I love that. I would absolutely love that show. And if I'm a casual fan that's just seeing this, never seeing the show, I'm still gonna get my memory. I'm still gonna get the part that the only part I knew when I went in was memory. I'm I don't know anything else about this show except for their cats and there's memory at the end, and so I'm you still get that. You get your power ballad to close the show, or not even close the show, but to bring that back. And then it's it's gonna end. Then there's one more song that kind of confused me to begin with, So you still get the same experience. You just, for the like super fans, you get a little bit more of a fun of like, well, why can't we have a different choice?
Right? I gotta say, I love it. Let's do it, Mike.
Okay, I'm ready. I mean, my goal, I've already accomplished one goal, which is I was able to give theories to the US 6 tour to perform on stage. Like very random, weird. These aren't going to change the show, but like, could you play this with this character this day, which is a little offbeat. But my real goal is to do like, to help. I can't produce or done. I know nothing about theater. I couldn't choreograph it. I have no idea what goes into this. But I'll come to Lancaster if we can do this, and I can help you just like with some of the, let's do this version. I'll help market it. We'll help sell it. It'll be great.
It's why they call the show, it's now and forever. You know, you're going to happen forever. So let's make it fun.
I love it. We can do it. I mean, I'll call the people at Beef and Boards. Let's go. They're half that crowd's there to eat anyway, so they're not going to notice the difference.
Oh, that's the whole other aspect of doing cats and dinner theater. It's a whole nother world.
So let's continue.
Yeah.
Let's keep going. So you like, where were all the other places you did it? And now I'm really curious, like, what were the settings of it? Like you said, tire. That's very Tommy Boy in Ohio. If you did tires.
So that first time when I went to that audition, I saw Mark's call for Beef and Boards right when I got off of tour, and I almost didn't go. It was in the morning. I was like, I don't want to do cats. I just did it for a year.
Yeah.
But I had heard his concept and that there was a cool production that he did at the Marriott in Chicago. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go and see what his choreography is like and just, use it as a dance class. So I went, and I had never met him before. I had never auditioned for him before. I just was like, the way the man runs a room was just so amazingly professional and warm and welcoming that by the end of that audition, I was like, if I don't get this, I'm going to be really pissed off because I really want to work with this guy.
Yeah.
And that was my first time at Beef and Boards, was in 2003, 2000. It was like right at the end of the year. So yeah, I had never worked with him. I had never like done that. It was hard because it was kind of taking what I had learned and was like embedded in my brain of what the show was and letting it kind of go and just try to absorb what he was.
It's a tweak. It's like a variation.
Right. And at the same time, on his end, I think it was, him going, oh gosh, it was myself and Jean-Michel and Tucker Ty were in that production with him that were from that we were the only ones that had done the original show before in that cast. So I think he was kind of looking at us to be like, are you guys okay with this if we do this? And we at one point, we all three were just like, we are here for you. We want to do your production. Let that go. Let us be here and do it.
I love it. I didn't realize they did it. Neither of them mentioned it. I've got Indiana stuff directly behind me, and neither of them mentioned that they did Beef and Boards in Indianapolis. So
Tucker Tucker did a production with him somewhere else first.
Okay.
Jean-Michel and I were in that production, and another person from tour, Adam Walters, was in that production.
Okay.
He was an Alonzo from tour.
So what was your setting at Beef and Boards? Was it Junkyard?
That first time it was an abandoned theater. So they built a fake proscenium that was sideways and oversized. We could climb up over it and lay on top of the proscenium. There was a fake curtain with a tassel. There was like a spiral staircase that looked like it would have been backstage.
Yeah.
And that thrust stage comes out there. So that's where the buffet is before the show. That's where the buffet is. And sometimes some cats put their hands on tables and take people's napkins, and it was very interactive. And we were all throughout the theater in the aisles dancing, and I did love that portion, that part of being at Beef and Boards, is that you can go out in the audiences.
Is this where Grizz went on the tassel across? Because there is a little spot in that corner of that theater so she flew over.
She went up and flew all over the audience and went out back of the theater.
That is phenomenal. Yeah. I never saw it in Indiana. I know my sister saw it, but it would have been like years before you even did it. She saw it as an early kid.
Right. No, I don't remember, or no, I don't think I've ever heard of them doing it prior to when we did it in 2004.
Oh, then maybe that was the one. That still would be the way at least it was told to me when I started doing this. And my mom's like, yeah, I took your sister, not you, to Beef and Boards years ago. But she made it seem like my sister was like 5 or 6, which would have been 90s,
I'll have to do some research
2000s. But okay, so you do Beef and Boards, you do. Like, what's the outdoor theater? You did a
that's
Theater Under the Stars?
I did Theater Under the Muni. The Muni, I did not do the production at the Muni. That's actually outside. Theater Under the Stars is actually an indoor theater.
Okay.
But the way that the theater is built, it has a beautiful, sky.
Just misnamed.
Sky. That show there, I did Marc's version, but we did it on the original set. So that was also weird to do his show on the original set, because my brain would then click into, at this part I usually run up and jump on the tire, or run up and get up on the oven, and I'm not that character in this play right now,
Yeah. Because were you playing as were you McCavity then?
I usually play McCavity for Marc Robin in that production. I've covered Tugger for him, Skimble in the original. Who else have I done? I think that's it. I'm just too tall to be a Mistopheles. And I've played those characters. Ohio at Carousel Dinner Theater, which is no longer there. That was the abandoned tire factory. So Firestone was a sponsor, and there were like big monster truck tires all over the place. A lot of, they built these catwalks that went over the audience there, so we could crawl on those above the audience and hang off of them. And some of them were low enough that we could, flip off of them and do things. It was always, every time I did the show, it didn't feel like I was, I'm going to go do cats again. It always was like I ran to it because it was an adventure. It was something that I could exercise my acting muscles and also get a really great workout.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. I want to, what were the other, so you said, Tire Factory, theater, anywhere else weird? Where's the amusement park?
He did the amusement park. That was his original concept at the Marriott Lincolnshire in Chicago. And I think he did that at two other theaters that I wasn't a part of those productions. I think those are all of the places that he set the show.
What other story, not changes, but like, what's the other different versions of his story? Like you said, there's the Syllabub and Grizabella connection. There's the friends with the Bomb and Jelly and Jenny. Is there any other kind of like,
I think those
relationships he like plays?
The broadest, those are the biggest concepts for him. Tugger is definitely more of a dancer track in his show than it is in the original. Like he's a dancer, like toe touches and sometimes something as well. And he's got relationships for sure with Bomb Ballerina in Marc's production. Like they are an
What about
item.
Mistopheles? Is there that relationship?
Mistopheles is pretty similar to how he is in the original production. The relationship with, Victoria is there. I'm trying to think of other. Is the
Demeter McCavity still big?
The Demeter McCavity connection is still there, yes. And I'm thinking of other. I think that's. Oh, he has at the end of the first act of his show for Little Memory, Grizabella comes face to face with a younger version of herself. So there's a younger, more glamorous character that shows up and almost does a mirrored dance with her.
Interesting. Who performs that though? Normally, is it like
that? I think Syllabub leaves the ball early to go do a kind of a change and comes out in a younger, more glamorous look of Grizabella, and they do this mirrored kind of movement and dance where Grizabella sees herself, and then it's a memory for her, and then she fades away, and that's how Little Memory kind of starts for her at the end of the act.
Wow. Yeah. So a couple minor, like these are minor changes, but they're really interesting because I only know Andy's version, like really, and those are a lot of similarities to it. I think they just kind of cut out some of the stuff that was borderline offensive or racially insensitive in current times. But the main change from Andy was dance, and like I couldn't tell you the first difference about those things, but story wise, it felt fairly similar.
Yes. I think the biggest difference in Andy's was the choreography, not so much the story change.
I love it. So Marc's went a little story change. I mean, this is great. This is like my dream. I didn't, every time I hear that these are the questions I ask, which is like, I love that there was more thought put into it because a lot of times, like we recently, by the time this airs, have gone to BroadwayCon, and we were at BroadwayCon, we're debating some of these like what I would call split moments of what were we able to like. I sparked a little online controversy with the Cats fans because I made a joke about Bomb and Demeter having sexual energy, and someone was like, "They are sisters." And I'm like, "But are they?" And I was like,
I mean, maybe in your brain they are. Everybody takes from what they want from the story.
I was like, because I don't know. So I threw it up online, and I got a near 50-50 split of answers of, are they sisters or are they friends? And what was fascinating is the people who have done the most recent tour or that were in any version of Andy, who was a lot of my guests who voted on that, because that group's more on social media, they all voted friends. But my votes were almost split 50-50. So there are so many of those things that exist in this world where it's like, it could be, it could not be. And I love that Marc's version is answering some of those. Like, we're going to play into this.
Even on the original tour, I don't think I ever looked at those two characters as sisters. They were always friends for me. Definitely.
That's what my answer was, the friends on that one.
Gosh. Am I going to start getting online hate as well?
I don't know. I mean, it's not hate, because the Cats fans are so, they're so pleasant. Like, yes. they disagree with you, but they're just happy that someone's even talking about this in some cases, because there's not a lot of content out there.
Cats fans are amazing. We used to have them at the stage doors on tour. They would be dressed, and some of their costumes sometimes were just incredible. And they would make us the most lovely gifts. Like, we would get these beautiful gifts. And it's so crazy, because when we were on tour, it was right when a lot of online stuff was starting. It was, the new millennium, and there was like a blog that we would all, like, each week we'd be like, oh gosh, what'd they say about us this week? Or sometimes they would be at our stage doors and then almost verbatim type out conversations that we were having with them at the stage door, and that's what would get posted that week. It was cool, but also a little strange. The show it means so much to so many people that it's 50-50, like you said. People either love it, or they hate it. I never really thought I loved watching the show. I love doing the show. It is like nothing I've ever done in my life or will ever do. Even to this day, watching it, I'm still kind of like, it's fine, it's good, but it's so much. I've gotten so much more out of it by participating in it, and the tribal feeling you get by being on stage with those people. It's the intimacy of it, the connection you have without speaking a word to anyone else. It's like nothing I've ever done before.
Yeah, because I don't know. People ask me all the time, because it's podcasts, like, if I'm a super fan of the show, and I'm not even sure how I feel about the show. But what I like about it is the world it created and the open opportunity it has for this, like, deep kind of like comical analysis of the characters. Like, that to me is fascinating, that there is no answer. Like, I love that part about this, because it's so open ended. But to your point, like, I mean, I've watched it. I watched it on the most recent U.S. tour, and I had a blast, because I also talked to them the day before and got to kind of meet the actors and gave them things that I was like looking for. And I was like, okay, great. And then I went on. I've only seen it live 4 times.
Oh, wow.
And they were, the first time I saw it in 2016, exactly a year later, a friend wanted to come. And then I saw it back-to-back days when I went to do the video with the 2000 or the sixth, the most recent, the sixth tour in DC. I saw it back-to-back days. I saw the night when they did it, and then I just happened to be filming with them before their show. So I was like, well, I might as well just stay here before I take the train back to New York. And so that's it, though. And I've seen it on the 1998 movie on YouTube a couple times, or versions, clips of it. But I've yet to find anybody who's been able to articulate why they hate it. So everyone who says that they love or hate it, the love, they have a real reason. The hate, they're just like, I didn't really like it.
You're exactly right, Mike. That's what I've encountered too. They can't explain to you why they hate it. They just tell you that they don't like it.
Yeah, which is fine. It's theater. There's plenty of things where I've walked down and just been like, that wasn't for me. I get it. I'm sure some people love it. That just wasn't for me. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back for more of The Wrong Cat Died. I want to pivot because I want to talk about casting. Because you are like working in casting, and this is a show that, like, it can have some variations. And I think the one that I've noticed over the years is the Grizabellas have gotten younger. And I don't know if that's just a byproduct of like the tours I've seen recently, or just that they're looking for younger. But when you what does that casting say? What's it like being on that side of the table, having done it so many times on the other side of the table?
Casting, I mean, in general, there's so many things that come into play. If you've already cast your Monkus Trap because it's a friend of yours, that's worked for you for a long time, and that you want to, that's your first casting is Monkus Trap, and he's a specific type. you're going to start to cast around that. You're going to find people who fit with that. I think I'd mentioned this too in our earlier conversations before the podcast. I think the original show has a very specific way of casting. The Bombs are always, tall, thin, lanky girls. The Cassandras are in that same world. The Victorias are petite, and the Mistos have to be I think under 5'7" or something like that. The Alonzos have to be tall. The McCavities have to be tall. There's a very specific body types for the original show. Working with Marc and pivoting and kind of changing things up, it's not so specific. Where it's more about we actually take a lot of the actors acting into play, casting them, because there is a lot of human emoting in Marc's version. I guess to actually answer your question, casting it, obviously it's a huge dance show and a huge singing show, which I don't think people realize how hard of a sing the show is actually as well. So you have to find triple threats. You have to find actors who can dance really well, who can sing really well, and can act, because at the end of the day, yes, you can take the dance from it, you can take the singing from it, but it's one of the most amazing acting challenges I've ever had in my life. So to find a good combination of all of that, and then at the end of the day, you also want to cast kind, good humans. You want to create a group that's going to make that show. The show is all about relationships and how you interact with one another physically and emotionally. So that's for me. That's what casting that show is like for me.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to hear you say that, because there's some where there is a lot of precedent for this. So there is it's 40 plus years. People know, they have some expectation that it can't be so far off that it becomes kind of strange. But at the same time, there's some positive evolution of body types. So, it's let's be more body positive and have a lot of these things where if the person is talented and capable of doing the number and a vision, why does that does Bomb have to be that tall, or does this have to happen? So I love that there is some evolution there, and you're right, it is a huge there's booth singers, that's something that doesn't happen in most shows, right?
Gosh, no, on tour all of our swings they sung in the booth. There were 6 or 7 of them at a time. I want to go back to your discussion about the Grizabellas too, but I did want to say that on tour there was so much injury that happens in the show that I remember our stage manager coming on the call one day before, a half hour, saying that it was the first time that we had our entire playing company in 76 days. We hadn't done the show in 76 days without swings on. And sometimes these swings, I'm raising my hands to the swings of the world, because you're unsung heroes. They would come on mid-show. We call them swing bitches is what we called them. We would all, anyone else that wasn't on as a swing, if you had to go on mid-show, you would rush to them and help them get their makeup on, help them get their unitard on, get their mic on, get them ready to go on. There were times on stage where I did the couple's minuet in the poem before the ball, or during the ball, I forget, with Cassandra. And I didn't realize that from the time I had seen her before, a couple minutes before on stage, to the time I got to her at couple's minuet, it was a different actor, because the swing had come on between, something had happened to her. So yay to the swings. But the Grizabella question, I don't know why that is happening, or if it's, if you look back at Betty Buckley, she's an older woman now in 2023, but she was a fairly young woman, I think, when she originated the role. So she wasn't too old when she did it. I've had all over ranges with my Grizzes in all the 9 times I've done it. Some of them have been very young, some have been on the older side. Me personally, I like a more seasoned actress playing the part. It just seems it's better for me story-wise, because she doesn't necessarily have to dance. You don't have to put her as a double in the first number. You can fill that out. It's not necessary. So I tend to like Grizabellas who are a little more seasoned in their careers. I think it just brings way more depth to the story.
Interesting.
And character.
Yeah, they don't. I know that they now a lot of times they dance in the opening number as Baby Grizz. And to me, for Grizabella, I think all I would care about is can they sing? Can they sing memory or not?
And they can come out and act, and can they work that costume? And I got to do the show in Houston with Linda Balgord, who closed Grizabella on Broadway. And just watching her work, I mean, that I think when I did it there, I had done it. That was like my fifth or sixth time doing the show. I got to do it with Ken Page, who was the original designer,
Wow.
which was also so amazing. And I designed the makeup at that production. So handing both of them their makeup plots to say, hey, here's what I have for you. Please don't feel that you need to do this. And then watching them incorporate my design into their makeup throughout the run, and just watching their professionalism and approach to the show and having such knowledge and history with it I get chills even talking about it right now. This is a great experience as an actor.
Yeah, I can only imagine. So fascinating. The younger Grizz, I think, is more of a byproduct of the most recent tours non-equity. I think like you just run into a little bit more of that. So it's, I don't know how much, and I mean, this is just me as a guessing as someone who's watched this for the past now 3.5, 4 years, whatever. I started really kind of digging into this in 2019. Is I think it's just more of a byproduct of the scenario and not a choice. Not
Absolutely.
like we probably they probably went through the auditions and the best real option just happened to be younger, and then that's where they did it. And I think you saw that with a couple other too, because like Jenny's started to get younger. Like the 2016 Broadway Jenny's were both young and
in
like
their 20s. Yeah,
and they were phenomenal tap dancers and just performers, but they're not this like old motherly kind of thing that you would expect from there. So I just think some of it's
you can only
evolution.
hide so much behind the makeup. You still see a young person even though you have makeup on. I agree with you. I think the casting, I think skewing younger was probably because a lot of the non-union touring back in, before the Broadway revival happened, and you just, there are less older actors that are non-union,
Yeah. Now, before we go to our rapid fire, I got to ask you about Spike. Because you got to perform with Spike. We've now, by the time this has come out, the Spike story has been out for the world to hear. But I'm fascinated by the whole idea because it's clearly a cost savings measure. Like it was just let's not have to make 5 different unitards. Let's make one and give the same 5 different pairs of shoes.
Exactly.
But I love that you guys all named and almost gave Spike a story. So does Marc have a Spike?
What's that?
Does Marc's version have a Spike?
Well, Tucker has done Marc's version and created he's played Pouncible, and I think he was Mistopheles in a production. He brings Spike to all the shows he does. So Tucker, oh my gosh, there were mornings we would do have matinees, and it would be the end of an 8-show week, and Tucker would be on that day as a split track and was going to be Spike, and he'd be getting his costume on, and it was his first time doing the show that week, and the rest of us had been doing it. It was our 8th show. We were ready for the day off, and Tucker comes on stage and is just messing with you. And I think Jean-Michel touched on it. We were kittens, we were Tumblebrutus, Pouncible, Syllabub, Misto, Rumble Teaser. We're all kittens, so we're on the floor the whole time on our hands and knees, and Tucker would just come over as Spike and just barrel roll you and just roll you over, and I'd you can't say, Tucker, get the hell off of me right now. Instead, I would just, as Tumblebrutus, I would just get in my pounce, pissed off mode. He was so much fun to play with, and you never knew what you were going to get with Spike on stage. So it's Spike now and forever.
It's such a fascinating piece of the show that I knew nothing about, because it was created by a byproduct, but also it's this unique, there's almost a backstory for Spike.
I would also love to know if, obviously we haven't, Tucker and Jean-Michel and I have not done cats in a long time at this point, but I would wonder if that story or that character got passed down and is still kind of, an iteration of Spike is still happening in any productions that are going on.
I have not heard, at this point I've talked to 25, I think, different productions. Which is, and I group all regional as one. So I'm just kind of regional as just all of the different variations of regional as one. And it's still 25-ish productions. I've never heard Spike until Jean-Michel. I just never come up. And then I was fascinated, and that's why I immediately was all right, I got to talk to Tucker.
I love it.
Because it's just and it's so funny because it's I can just imagine being we don't want to pay for this. Here's one costume, go.
Exactly.
And it's because at the end of the day, nobody's going to know the name difference for 99% of the crowd.
Right.
And the crowd that is going to know it is the one that's in the early infancies of the internet writing the blog about it anyway.
Exactly.
but it doesn't exist on the Cats Wikipedia page, which has kind of been my source of truth, not source of truth, but like it's a pretty well documented of like a lot of the very weird, nuanced things that get credited are in there, and Spike is not. So I need to add him one day.
He's out to the world now. We've released him to the world. And it's a testament to Tucker too, his talents, because Tucker is a fantastic dancer. He can sing. He's a tumbler. He was just like the most glorious swing that we could have asked for, and to then bring that skill set and make our lives so amazingly awesome on stage was awesome.
I loved, like, the one thing he said that really kind of blew my mind was that, like, I had to look down to see what shoes I was wearing to see who I was. Because that was like, you're just in this one costume for 5 different cats. And he's like, all right, that's like, that was also what you would know. Like, you wouldn't know who he is and like where he's supposed to be. You have to look at his shoes.
Oh, he's supposed to be Pounceville. Okay, you're over there, That
is so strange of a thing, but that would be, that would be another thing. Like, can we imagine if we got Spike at the vote one night? Like, Spike could get the vote. I would rig Spike a vote one night. And then he'd be hanging on the curtain or the tire or whatever it is,
just living his best life, just that he got
I the visual of, I went to Beef and Boards recently. We took my niece to see Sound of Music when I was there, and it was like right when it reopened from COVID, and so it was like the first time that anybody had a buffet in ages,
right?
and I hadn't been in there since I was a kid, and I didn't go much. Like my mom's a music teacher, like we're a family that went to the traveling shows, like the touring stuff that comes to Indiana. But like we were growing up, I didn't go to a ton. It was more like Lion King comes, let's go, like not every single thing at Beef and Boards. Mm-hmm. But I was just in there so recently that like I have this very visual of exactly where he went, or I guess Grizabella went over into this like little nook on the other side where there's like the ensemble sings when they're not on at times.
Yeah.
And flying over all these Hoosiers who just stuff their face with food is such a visual I can only imagine.
Yeah, I did it again there in 2014, and that's the last time I did the show. That's the last time I've done Cats was in 2014, and it had been 8 years since the time I had done it prior to that. So there was an 8-year break where I didn't do the show, and when I was asked to come back and do it there, I had to think about it because I was like, oh gosh, can my body still do this?
Yeah.
Am I still able to do this? And it was a rude awakening on the first day of rehearsal. And then I distinctly remember the last night of the show during Big Memory, listening to our Grizz sing the Little Memory that night, having that moment saying, I think this is it. I think this is it. I don't think I'm going to do it again.
You're the Joker choice now.
Yeah, it was almost my Heaviside Layer moment.
Yeah.
But now, as in the position I'm in now, I'm hoping that we can present the show here at the Fulton at some point, because it's never been done here. And I don't know if you've ever been in our theater here, but it is a National Historic Landmark, and it is one of the most beautiful theaters you'll ever step foot in. So to do a show of that grandeur in the space and be part of it in a different way, artistically, guide it with Marc would be just an amazing treat.
So have you thought, if you get a green light, what's your setting? Like, is there some historical landmark that you got to put in there for?
I can't give away all of it. We got to keep some surprises.
Okay.
I will say that the discussions of what we will do have already begun, and it will be epic.
Amazing. Well, I hope you get the ability to do it, and when you do, there's nothing more than I would like to do than to come to rehearsal.
Yeah,
and when you do the story day, and you talk through, I want to just be there and a fly on the wall, or to be able to just give like, hey, let me tell you what a bunch of other people have said, because I know that there was a regional production recently in Atlanta, and I've talked to some people in that cast, and they use the podcast as a way to hear how other people have approached their character. So it's like I'm almost created, like I feel like I'm documenting history of like, here is how this Mistopheles thought about being Mistopheles in this production, and how they handled it in the West End for this Victoria, and vice versa. So I think
that's one of the best things about the show, if you're starting from scratch to set it with a new company, is to take a portion of rehearsal very early on and just say, hey, everybody, take the next day or so and really think about who you are in this play and what your connections are. And that just doing that and sharing that with the rest of the actors just sets you up for success, because you're like, oh, I never thought about that story. Let's see how we can work on that and make that come so the audience even sees that story come to life.
I love it.
It's one of those shows that I don't think they had any idea what it was going to do or be, and it's just become this, phenomenon. There's an interview I think Hal Prince had early on where he just said, everyone kept asking me, what is it about? What is it about? And he said, it's about cats.
It's just cats. Yeah, it's just about cats. Well, and it's way more, and we've uncovered that.
Yeah.
But, okay, we got to do some rapid fire. If you could go on one night for any cat, whether you've done it before, you could fit, like if it's male, female, physically could do it. Who would you want to go on as for one night?
Oh, Grizabella.
Just the princess track. Just come in 15 minutes.
I want to be able to stand there in some fancy heels and a fabulous dress and just sing Memory.
I love it.
Hands down.
Who are your favorite and least favorite characters in the show?
Oh gosh. Doing it or watching it?
Either.
I think I'd have to say my favorite characters are probably Mungo Jerry and Victoria.
Okay. What about least favorite? Which cats bug you?
Cats that bug me. Play-Doh. Play-Doh. Okay. I never understood that. I guess it's there because usually Play-Doh then leaves and turns into McCavity. So he's there as I just never really understood that character. I don't necessarily hate it. I just didn't really ever understand it.
That was one I didn't realize how much more time the Play-Doh McCavity track is in Play-Doh than in McCavity. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of one that I've dug into recently a little bit, but I think that it might be the episode after you. So that's why I'm like, I don't know if it's coming out.
I think in the original show, he would come on he'd still be Play-Doh at the top of the second act. And then when Gus comes out, he would leave and go start the makeup change to McCavity. But I just never understood. I never had a huge relationship with the character.
Okay.
So I'd say that.
Okay. Favorite song from the show?
Oh gosh, I think the Moments of Happiness, maybe, or obviously Memory is a beautiful song, but that's just the cliche answer. I think okay. I loved. It's so crazy to say, but I think doing that song to just sit there still and look out and just place where you're at in that moment in the show, to have old Dude sing that, and that was always a really cool moment, I think, in the show, is Moments of Happiness.
My fun one is, if one cat was going to be a casting director, who would be the best at it?
If one cat was going to be a casting director, who would be the best at it? I have to say myself, right?
Yeah. Well, no, I mean like character, like not a performer. Which personality of one of the characters would be best at doing it?
I'm going to go with probably Cassandra.
Oh, okay.
Cassandra, she's just so regal and has I think she has a check on everybody in the show.
I was thinking Monk for the same reason.
Oh, Monk is trap too, yeah.
But no, I like Cassandra's a good answer.
Cassandra's such a cool character. I think I'd want to play her for one day too.
Okay, yeah. Okay, $1 million question. You've done this many times. I want to hear you, Joey. If you're old Deuteronomy for the day and you get to choose a Jellicle choice, who are you choosing and why?
Oh gosh, who am I choosing and why? I knew you were going to ask me this too.
It's the title of the show.
It's the title of the show. I honestly don't think the wrong cat died. I think it's Grizabella. Yeah, I'm sorry. I do.
Okay, give me your rationale. I've had a good run of non-Grizabella choices, so it's just like, all right, it's time.
I think the story is set up that way from the beginning. She's this figure that is this. She has the biggest arc of any of them. So she starts in one place and ends in another, and I think the redemption it's the natural progression.
So let me ask you this from Mark's lens here of now Syllabub's daughter. I'm Syllabub. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden I'm the one that accepts my mom back to the tribe, and we're immediately going to kill her. Like, do I not want a year with her? Like, why can't she go next year?
I guess you're right. Yeah. Then maybe if I had to pick a second choice, I would say then Gus. Then Gus should go.
Okay, so you're picking Gus over Jenny between your trio.
Oh yes.
But you're still picking Grizz.
Yeah. Even in Marc's, I think the relationship is solidified that throughout the entire production of their relationship, and I think Silverbub knows she's going to be left in good hands. And I also feel that Grizz is, I don't know that she's necessarily dying, but she's being reincarnated, and she may come back, and she may come back as a kitten the next season to play with Silverbub. Who knows?
Yeah, I get the story. I mean, like it's been around for 40 years. Like, it makes sense. It's been successful. Like, I can't really argue it that much.
Right.
I just have really struggled with, if I'm looking at best performances and doing a voting American Idol style or X Factor style, I probably wouldn't pick Memory. I mean, Memory is great and it's been belted. It's super powerful, and like it would be a show closer with, you know, the very touching package video before she comes on stage, you know. But I probably would be combining things that I had more entertainment with, which was like Mungo, Jerry, and Rumpel Teaser, or the Tugger Mustaflis numbers, or some of like the more upbeat, interesting ones. So that was my original joke.
I got it. Yeah, but I think if you look at, you know, the way you said we were talking about casting and now it's skewing younger, originally those characters that are kind of the ones that are have the possibility to go are the ones that are in their latter years and are that they would be sent to the Heaviside Layer. So
yeah, so that's why my actual answer is Gus this year, Grizabella next year.
I could go with that. I could get on board with that.
I will mark your answer down as Grizabella because I did keep track, and you know, she's still holding a slight edge on Gus, but she is not half the votes.
Okay.
So I don't know if I'm slowly changing people's minds or if I just struck a chord with everybody when I came up with this idea.
It's a nice conversation piece.
Yeah, it is definitely something that most people don't think about that I have spent a lot of time thinking about. But
I love it. I'm so grateful for it.
This has been
awesome.
Amazing. How can people stay in touch with you and the theater and everything you're working on?
I'm an Instagrammer, so at Joey Tumble, JoeyTumble. That name was given to me by Mr. Ryan Jackson on tour because I was Tumblebrutus and he just called me Joey Tumble. So you can find me at there. And the Fulton.org is anything you want to know about where I work and what I do here at the Fulton.
Awesome. We'll link that in there, and then hopefully one day you are doing this show and I will be taking a trip down to Lancaster and joining you to see what we can do.
I can't wait.
Well, this has been so fun. So thank you for being a great guest.
Thank you very much.
And thanks everyone else for listening to this episode of The Wrong Cat Died, the podcast breakdown of catastrophe. To follow along, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads at The Wrong Cat Died, or check our website, thewrongcatdied.com.